Hello and welcome to the Sunday Guardian podcast with Joyeeta Basu. Viewers, as you know, so much, there's too much turmoil happening in the world. And especially if you're looking at India, two big powers, and what exactly is India headed and those relations with those two big powers, which way are things headed? I'm talking about India China and India US. Now, to discuss this, we have here a very acclaimed, well known guest who is Captain Alok Bansal, who is director of India Foundation. He was in China, specifically Tibet, last year, and he is very clued in about what is going on. And of course, you may want to hear what he has to say. Welcome, Captain Bansal, to the show.
Thank you, Joyeeta, for getting me on this show.
Okay, first of all, right now on top of people's mind is that photograph with Mr. Jaishankar and Mr. Xi Jinping at the SCO foreign ministers meeting. He was there, and so there's a lot of commentary that is coming on that India is becoming quote unquote friends with China, and that we are kind of capitulating to China. What is your view on this?
See, firstly, when you go to a multilateral conference or a venue or a summit, you obviously interact with everyone who's present there. And shaking hands is a normal courtesy that any diplomat would extend to any visiting head of uh, the country or head of a nation. And I think so, nothing much needs to be read as far as the handshake is concerned. I think anybody who would have been in his place would have also shaken the hands. That's not an issue. Having said that, we need to be very clear that today China is a big power. In purchasing power parity terms, it's probably the largest economy. And India, as also a very, very large economy, we have a lot of complementarities. Actually, there are huge complementarities as far as economy of China and economy of India are concerned, which allows India to become actually extremely competitive in other markets. So there is nothing wrong in interacting with China. I don't agree that India is capitulating to China. I think this is a concerted campaign by certain sections of the society, certain sections of the media who may have been making it. India is too large to capitulate to anyone, either to China or to United States. We are too large and we have cherished both our non-alignment and our strategic autonomy, which is, I think, ingrained into Indian strategic culture.
No, but when we are looking at China, for example, India is China no doubt is wooing us in a big way. And the kind of talk that is coming out, especially from the Chinese embassy here. And it seems, the optics are that there is some kind of a rapprochement, perhaps, which was not there in the last few years post Galwan and all. But at the same time, when we look at the border situation is pretty bad. There is no de escalation on the Chinese side of the line of actual control. So, what exactly isn't this some kind of double standards that China has towards India while it is basically, wants to tap into our market, but at the same time is trying to ensure that we are facing some kind of a crisis, a constant crisis along the border, which may even erupt into some kind of a conflict.
See, when we talk of China, right from 2014, there have been serious overtures made towards India. And the fact is, when President Xi Jinping went to Ahmedabad and a public reception was held for him in, I think, 2014, that was the first time a Chinese head of state was being hosted at a public reception, I think after 5 or 6 decades. So there is no doubt that China did make serious overtures towards India right from 2014. There is a deep-rooted desire within China to make or improve relations with India. There is no doubt about it. But of course, as I said, both countries have their own requirements. We have an extremely vexed problem, that is the border problem. And it's an extremely complex issue which will become even more complex as the days pass by. So resolution of border dispute is extremely difficult to my mind. And as a result, I think we will have issues as far as border is concerned, we need to also understand that when it comes to China, our concept of line of actual control varies from China's concept of line of actual control. And since both the militaries patrol up to their limits of line of actual control, I think there is an overlap. And whether there is tension or not, this we actually need to go through the Ministry of Defense reports. If you actually go back, you will find that the so-called transgressions have been taking place consistently. And this has been happening, I think, year after year. This has been happening because from our point of view, if they come beyond what we perceive as our line of actual control, that's a transgression. And from their point of view, when we go beyond what they perceive as line of actual control, it's a transgression. There were unfortunate incidents, what happened in Doklam, Galwan, which actually aggravated the situation. And we need to understand that when you are in an extremely stressful situation, one small incident can derail the whole process. And that's what has happened. And
It was not a small incident. 20 people were killed.
I'm not trying to say that it was. I'm just making a hypothetical. I'm not taking Galwan it was a very serious incident. We lost lives and it was a very important. But what I'm trying to say is that when you are eyeball to eyeball and when you have a strained relationship, anything which may not be intentional, may be unintentional, could aggravate situation. And we saw, I think post Galwan, our relations actually nosedived. And I think they were as bad as probably in 60s, 70s or something, probably. But I think Chinese realize that India is too important, powerful, and they want to reach out to India. At the same time, you need to understand the Chinese policies towards India stem from twin objectives, which are contrarian. The first objective is that India should not become an ally of the US. That's what is their primary objective. They don't want that India should perceive China as a threat and start joining with the US and become a permanent enemy, which they don't want. At the same time, they do not want India to rise to such a level that it becomes a challenger to China on the global arena. Now, to meet these twin objectives, again, in my perception, what China does is that rather than confronting India directly, it actually engages with India's neighbors so that India remains tied down to South Asia and doesn't pose a challenge on the global arena as far as China is concerned. So that is what it is. But we need to understand that as far as China is concerned, we have a lot of similarities. Culturally, we are similar. Civilizationally, we are similar. And I personally feel that as days pass by, China's ability to wage a conventional war is going to diminish. So I don't think so a military conflict, a deliberate, prolonged military conflict is feasible between India and China. However, resolution of border dispute is a very difficult process and it will require a very, very strong leadership both in India and China to resolve it.
Yeah, so when you're talking about, when you're saying that it engages with India's neighbors to basically keep India tied down. So I guess Operation Sindoor was also the kind of help they offered to Pakistan. That also is part of it, isn't it? And we have to, whenever we are talking about India-China relations, I mean, that's a constant factor that China will try to engage with you, but they will try to also destabilize you.
See, one must be very clear, and at least I am quite clear about it. In any India-Pakistan conflict, China will never get directly involved. But in any Sino-Indian conflict, if it happens, Pakistan is bound to enter directly. So this factor we need to understand. As far as Pakistan is concerned, there is no doubt that Pakistan's armed forces, the majority of the military hardware is of Chinese origin. And it was Chinese planes, J-10C and Chinese missiles, which were the most potent weapons which Pakistan had in its inventory. But please remember, Pakistan's army had weapons from other countries also. It also had F-16. And US is talking in terms of giving them more weapons. It also had Turkish weapons. It also had some Russian weapons for that matter. So if weaponry has been supplied by a country to another country, does not make that country a direct participant in the conflict. That's my perception. Just because a country has supplied weapons to us doesn't make him an antagonistic to Pakistan. US also supplied weapons to us. We also got weapons from Russia. So that's not an issue, I think so. But yes, it is perceived that China had favorable disposition towards Pakistan. But my perception is that China is not very happy as far as their investments in Pakistan is concerned. And Pakistani society has not really accepted China or Chinese workers, Chinese people amidst them very amicably. In fact, today in Pakistan, anybody who wants to fight the government realizes that you kill 100 Pakistani doesn't really affect much to the government. But if you want the government to sit up and take notice, then you have to target the Chinese. And as a result, anyone who is fighting the government in Pakistan is actually targeting the Chinese and their assets. As early as 2008, Baloch had said that all Chinese companies and assets are valid targets. TTP and all the fundamentalists are as it is targeting Chinese. We saw it in different places. Even Sindhi nationalists from 2013 have been targeting Chinese and saying that they are helping Islamabad to colonize their land. So there is in Pakistan a huge section of the society which is against Chinese and which is targeting. As a result, none of the Chinese investments in Pakistan have actually started yielding any economic returns to them. And again, my personal take is the CPEC is not economically viable.
And are the Chinese having a second thought? Are they having second thoughts about CPEC?
See, China has now multiple options. China already is sending trains all the way to Iran through Central Asia. The trains have started going in. And they also are holding terminals in Chabahar port, as you know. They have some terminals which have been given to them. So if the train lines actually come from north of Iran, northeast of Iran, to all the way to Chabahar, then it would be a equally viable option. That could be a viable option. Ideally, again, it is my perception, and I have been saying that we should have a linkage from Karakoram to Kandla. Let them route it through India if they want to actually route their trade, and should also give us reciprocal access to Central Asia through China. Because we need to understand that our access to Eurasian heartland is severely hindered because Pakistan, as long as it exists, will never allow us to take our goods to Central Asia. Iran doesn't seem to be stabilizing very soon. I don't think so. Any movement through Iran now, at least in foreseeable future, can be very safe and secure. So, in that sort of a scenario, we have to look at some new access to Eurasian heartland, and that probably could be through Xinjiang. That's been the traditional route. In fact, if you look at it traditionally from Leh, there were routes going to Eurasian heartland that would go. And I think we need to look because that would also stabilize position in the border areas because there are points. It's not that the entire border with China is disputed. There are only places where it is disputed. Karakoram Pass is one place which both countries recognize as an international border point. We can have routes maybe that could improve relations, that could, but again, China has to show the will. They have to show the will. And it's an autocratic state, so there is no transparency. The bureaucracy there is as bad as in India. So many of the new ideas don't move forward because there are entrenched positions. Even if the leaders are willing to change, the bureaucracies take long time to change.
So, is China a threat for India or not?
China is definitely a challenge for India. And for a growing power like India, it's definitely a challenge. I won't say it's a threat. Threat is a different term. I don't think so today. There is a serious ideological conflict between India and China as existed in 1962 when China was the poster boy of an emerging communist state and India was a poster boy of democratic world. So there was actually something to be shown. Today China's communism is only in name. In fact, China is as capitalistic as any other capitalist power in the world. So I think ideology is now gone. And as I said, with the demographic crunch hitting China, a conventional war is out. So we have differences, and those differences have to be resolved. The biggest one is border dispute. We have dispute about Tibetan autonomy. We have trade imbalance. We have different perception on South China Sea. So there are a lot of things, but at the same time, we have a lot of convergences. We have a lot of convergences on globalization. We don't support this sort of tariff war which President Trump has been imposing unilaterally. Uh, we- in the past, on climate issues, we had a convergence. There are a lot of issues, and socially, I think our society and Chinese society is quite similar, unlike the Western societies, because both in India and China, family is the key. Family is the root based on which I think our societies function. Unlike West, where individual is the unit which actually functions. So rather than an individualistic societies that exist in US and Western countries, these are familial ties which are very, very important in Orient, including India and China.
So, when you are talking about Tibet, and of course, we have the Dalai Lama reincarnation coming up, a possible flashpoint again between India and China. What what are your views about that? And given that you have been to Lhasa only recently, so can you shed some light on that issue?
See, I visited Lhasa in November, and that was very, very significant because it's been my ardent desire to be there. And there is no doubt that Chinese have done a phenomenal development as far as Lhasa is concerned. You see 8 lane, 10 lane road highway going all the way up to Lhasa, a massive airport close to Lhasa, multi-story buildings which could compete with any place in Delhi NCR, show how much of economic development has taken place. Having said that, throughout Tibetan Autonomous Region, as they call, you see the two languages standing by side, Han Chinese as well as Tibetan script. And Han Chinese is more visible. In fact, in Lhasa city, most of the people you see are Chinese because Tibetans are generally in the background. So you see a huge transformation of the demography as far as the urban landscape of Tibet is there. Whenever you get to meet Tibetans alone, there is no doubt that they have a yearning for His Holiness. In fact, you talk to a Tibetan one to one, his heart is in the Dharamshala. Let there be no doubt about it. The second factor, which is also very interesting and which we need to understand, is that because of single child policy of China, though Hans have moved in a very big number, the population is not growing because population dwindling. On the other hand, Tibetan families by and large have multiple children. 3, 4, 5, 6, that is the norm as far as for a Tibetan family is concerned. So this fear that Tibetan identity will be obliterated, to my mind, is not true. So that is what I feel, and I think Dalai Lama is a revered personality, somebody who is revered not only in Tibet, India, but across the globe. And I think Chinese need to understand this. It would be worthwhile for Chinese to come to some sort of an accommodation with His Holiness while he's alive. Now that he has already said that yes, we accept Chinese suzerainty, we have been part of China, what he is looking for is autonomy. The autonomy that existed, where they had almost complete functional autonomy as far as their internal affairs were concerned. And I think China can easily grant that. And that is what is important. And I think once they do that, even the border dispute can be resolved. Because Tibetan government has already, the provisional Tibetan government in Dharamshala has more or less accepted Indian borders. So in that sort of a scenario, I think that could be a role model which could be followed. On the other hand, if they don't negotiate with him, it's going to be a vexed issue and will continue to uh, affect the relationships between two countries. His Holiness's reincarnation would become a very, very big issue because Tibetans won't accept anyone who is imposed by the Chinese. And now that His Holiness has already said that his reincarnation will be born in the free world, Chinese attempt to produce his reincarnation, I don't think so, will carry any conviction either with Tibetan masses or with the West. So I think if Chinese were sensible, they should have actually reached out to His Holiness. I think it is an opportunity for them to negotiate with him.
But are they likely to listen to this? Because from whatever I'm hearing, that there is a possibility that we may end up in a situation where there are two Dalai Lamas, two reincarnations, the Chinese one, and of course the other one born in the free world. Are the Chinese sensible enough for that?
See, we already have two Panchen Lamas.
Yes.
Both are in Chinese control as of now. But the fact is, if Chinese decide to do that, they know that their appointee would have no credibility. So if Chinese are so ignorant, or I would say so foolish, so as to go and bring out a reincarnation by themselves, I think that will not work. His Holiness has already clearly said which organization will find his reincarnation and has the sole authority to do so. I think their attempts may at best be foolhardy. It will not work out. So that's what I feel, that at this juncture, if Chinese were really interested in resolving this issue, because please understand, uh, Tibetan issue is something which resonates across the globe. They may not be as powerful militarily, or may not be in a position to cause a big upheaval in Tibetan autonomous region like the Uyghurs have been doing it. But that's an issue that resonates across the globe. His Holiness's stature, his personality draws a lot of support, especially in the Western world. So, if China actually wants to resolve issues, I think they need to come to terms with His Holiness and negotiate with him some sort of an autonomous. I'm sure if they give them Hong Kong like status or something like that, His Holiness would be happy, more than happy to uh, accept that. That's what I feel. I may be wrong, but that's my perception, that Hong Kong or Macau like status for Tibetan autonomous Tibet. Now, again, there is another issue. The Tibet, what is Tibet? Is it only Tar, or it is beyond it? Because Tibetans live far beyond the Tibetan autonomous region. So that's another issue. But those all issues can be resolved once there is a will on the part of Chinese to grant autonomy to Tibet.
Yes. Now, in this context, if I can move on to another issue, I mean, because you are talking about, not quote unquote to an extent normalization of India China relations, how do bodies like BRICS and SCO come into this, and and all the push that comes from Russia and China? Because after this I'll be moving on to USA. Obviously USA and India, the BRICS currency, about which against which Mr. Trump has been talking, and then there is a push that is coming from Russia that there should be an RIC, Russia, India, China. I mean, in this complex situation, if you can make some sense of this situation for our viewers.
See, BRICS is a very, very important forum, and I think it's a very important forum because G7 was an organization that had only the developed nations, and it's only of late that the G7 realized that this G7, which had initially incorporated Russia, then pushed it out, and uh, really does not control the global economy to that extent if they don't include India. And with India, China, and Russia being out of it, I think their influence on the global economy will diminish considerably. So, BRICS is actually an alternative, and I think it has countries from across the globe, those who were considered part of the global south also. So it's an important outfit, and I feel India should remain part of BRICS. I always have supported India's strategic autonomy, and India should always retain its non aligned status and strategic autonomy. I personally am in favor of BRICS currency, a currency which is not controlled by any single nation state. Let's be very clear. It should be
including not controlled by China.
absolutely. BRICS currency should be controlled by BRICS nations as a whole, where no single country has overwhelming dominance over that currency. That would be absolutely right, and that currency, I think, needs to evolve, because the way a dollar has been used.
Weaponized, in fact.
In fact, it's been weaponized the way Russia-Ukraine war, you saw. Not only that, the economic instruments were weaponized, where Russia was pushed out of SWIFT, Russian deposits were also confiscated. So there are question marks. The Global Committee of Nations, the global community at large, now looks at dollar and US unilateralism with suspicion. So I think there is a need for an alternative currency. Whether it should be BRICS currency or any national currency is a debatable point. From my point of view, it should be a multilateral currency. It should not be controlled by any single nation state.
You must have been, listening to these sound bites that are coming from Lindsey Graham. And of course, now NATO chief is also talking about it. It's all about, how there will be, we are going to destroy the economies of India, definitely, China and Russia, by imposing, somebody saying 100%, somebody saying 500% tariffs and all, because we are buying Russian oil. I mean, and then Trump is saying that yes, I'm considering it. Do you think things will come to such a pass that they are going to, apparently we are going to be sanctioned and all? What exactly is going on?
See, firstly, we need to be very clear. It's not, if we are sanctioned, this will not be the first time we are sanctioned. We have faced sanctions after our nuclear blasts in 90s also. Earlier also we have faced sanctions. So that's not an issue which we should be concerned with. Having said that, US foreign policy under Trump has become extremely transactional. So it is you give something and you get something. More significantly, there is no policy. One day some statement comes from President Trump, the other day some other statement comes. And his advisors and anybody other than him does not really matter. It doesn't matter if Tulsi Gabbard says that no, Iran is not close to making a nuclear bomb. He dismisses it offhand. So at this point of time, the United States is symbolized by one man and one man alone. And that individual is quite complex. And he believes in transactional relationship. If you give him a good deal, he's willing to do it. So if China gives him a good deal, he's happy to have a trade relations with us. If we give him a good deal, he's willing to have a trade. There are no policies. There are no ideals. There is no ideology. So in that sort of a scenario, one really doesn't know what's going to happen. Can you rely on a country which has become so damn transactional that its policies cannot be forecasted and cannot be estimated what's going to happen tomorrow?
No, but at the same time, when given that circumstances have changed from the time when we were sanctioned, I mean, Russia was a big power at that time. I mean, Russia is no longer a big power. Then we have to, contend with, of course, China on this side. When it comes to technology and all, you have to, and that is, there is a strong belief that you have to be close to the US if, in terms of, you are thinking in terms of taking the next leap forward.
I don't believe in that. I feel India is powerful enough to take that leap forward. We have the brains. In fact, the US is taking a leap because of Indian brains. Let's be very frank. Indians,
But they have all left. So
they
many
have,
of
they
them
have all left. For that is for us to introspect. Why are they all leaving? We should provide the right environment to them here. That is for us to leave. But to say that we have to piggyback on them, no. I feel we should be friends with US and we have common values. We and US share common values. And please remember, even during the Cold War, when India and US were on the opposite camps, we were receiving huge amount of US aid and interaction continued. And that's because the common values of democracy and pluralism bind us. Because I believe in today's world, even the interests are not permanent. Interests are also transient. There was a time when US was dependent on Gulf oil, it's no longer dependent on. So interest is gone. But values are permanent. If you believe in democracy, you believe in pluralism, that will keep us together. So I have no doubts that one odd administration may go against India. Long term, India and US will continue to converge because of common values that we share of democracy and pluralism, which is further bolstered by the rise of Indian diaspora. Today, Indian diaspora in US probably is the most powerful diaspora and the richest diaspora. It has already overtaken the Jewish diaspora as far as per capita income is concerned. So, it is an important diaspora, and I think that diaspora we should be grateful to because that has contributed immensely in bringing the two democracies closer.
So you are taking it for granted that yes, India-US relations are in for tough times, at least until the time that Trump is president.
I wouldn't say that till the time Trump is president. I am not saying it's in for tough time, but we are definitely in for unpredictable times, at least till the midterm elections, when Trump controls both the Congress and the White House.
And the Senate.
I said Congress, I mean House of Representative as well as Senate is controlling. Midterm will change the House of Representative composition and 1/3 of Senate. So let's see how it forms. But till then, we are in for unpredictable times because I'm not trying to say that Trump presidency is bad for India, but it is extremely unpredictable. And with that sort of unpredictability, you cannot plan. See, you can plan for a consistent policy emanating from a country. You cannot plan for erratic pronouncements stemming from the highest body of the state or the highest individual of the state.
So is that why India is totally keeping quiet? India is silent.
It's better because in that sort of a thing, if you make a statement, it may provoke him. It may provoke the US administration to do something. It's always better to keep silent and Indian diplomats, Indian diplomacy is absolutely, see, we are an old civilization. We are not a new country, let's be very frank. So we know how to deal with people. We can face adversity, and I think we are in the right hands. We are making progress. We are now a very, very big economy. And we are capable of doing things. And let me make it very clear, if sanctions are imposed on us, I'm sure indigenous technology will involve. Sometimes sanctions are actually an incentive for indigenization. And I think it is in the field of technology and data that we need to have greater sovereignty. I think these sovereignties we are not really talking about. I'm talking about data sovereignty, technology sovereignty. And again, I reiterate, I don't believe that we should be piggyback on China or US or Russia. India is too big a country to piggyback on some other country. We are capable of rising on our own with collaboration with all of them, friendship with all of them. And that's how India is doing.
Where do you see the Quad in such circumstances?
Well, Quad is also a nice grouping. As I said, I am for interacting with everyone.
Does it have a future? At least when Mr. Trump is president. I know, again, unpredictable, difficult to say.
I don't think so it will go very far as long as Trump is in complete control. So, I think again, in the lifespan of nations, a few years is a very small blip. So, it will be better to wait and watch. Quad has doing a lot of things. We were trying to create production facilities, shift a lot of production facilities, build up India's manufacturing capacities, etc. And I wish some things will continue because, as I said, while bureaucracies have their drawbacks, the one big advantage of bureaucracies is there is huge inertia. So even if the policies change, it takes a huge amount of time before the policies actually get implemented on ground. So I think things are working reasonably well, and I have no doubts we have a bright future.
Is a trade deal in the offing between India and US?
Oh, well, I'm not privy, I'm not part of the government, so I can't say. But obviously, US wants has a lot of requirements, so some of which may go against the interests of our agricultural sector. Though I personally feel there is a need for agricultural dairy reforms also. In a country where milk consumption is more than milk production, to say that our dairy farmers will be affected if we facilitate import of dairy products, to my mind, is fallacious. But again, that's the belief, and one would have to go with it. I think we need to have more free trade area FTAs with countries. We should go for FTA with ASEAN. Again, I was of the firm view that we should have joined RCEP, which we did not join, which was to my mind a good combination because it had countries from both sides. You had countries from the so-called free world as well as uh, China. So we could have been a very major power within the RCEP, and that would have given us a huge market. Uh, but there must have been some reasons why we didn't join it. But
I
again,
think they were worried about, New Zealand and Australia in particular dumping their dairy products in India. At least that is what I had heard at that
well, I
time.
did hear about that. But again, as I said, in a country where, according to statistics, our dairy consumption, our milk consumption is more than the production, and adulteration has become the norm, I don't think so. This was such a big issue. I personally feel that's my view. You can say Australians are very keen that we join because not only Australians, Japanese, even Southeast Asian countries were very keen that we join RCEP because we could have been an effective uh, counterweight to China. Now China looms large as far as the RCEP is concerned. And as I always believe, that if you are inside a bus, you can slow it down, you can turn it left, you can turn it right. But if you are outside the bus, hoping that you will be able to slow down the bus or turn it left or right is difficult.
Yeah. So, to conclude, my question is that what would be your suggestion, your advice to those in power, those in authority, first about dealing with China and dealing with the US when Mr. Trump is president?
See, I think India must continue to deal, and I think we have very strong factors which drive us to both the countries. We have religious, cultural, societal similarities with China. We are both Oriental societies, similar thinking. With US, we have the common values of democracy, pluralism. So we must reach out to both the countries and get whatever we can from both sides. And we must continue to leverage our non alignment and our strategic autonomy to grow without committing ourselves to being part of any alliance.
That is called fence sitting by the US, a lot of analysts, and then you cannot trust India. That also has come into the picture.
But who can trust US? Can
Okay.
anybody trust US? If I go back
Or
into
China.
US had a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan government led by Mr. Ashraf Ghani. What happened to Kabul? So can you trust US? See, if you actually go into the history of alliances, it has no meaning. Actually, if you look at it, before First World War, Italy had an alliance with Germany and Austria. When it eventually joined the war, it joined from the other side. So alliances have no meaning. And in any case, India is too big a country to commit its foreign policy to an external power.
I think that sums up today's discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Bansal, for being here. It was absolutely enjoyable speaking to you.
I must clarify that these candid views are purely my personal views
Yes,
and
of
do
course.
not represent the views of any organization or with which I am associated or was associated in the past.
Yes, it's important to mention that, I guess. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.